Yeah, so another really great feature on this website is the textbooks. And a great thing about the textbooks is that this is one of many resources that you don't have to have an account to use. And so even if you don't plan on integrating this freeware into your classroom, it can still be a useful resource that's available for parents or kids when they're looking for extra practice, or for filling gaps that you know that a student has, something that they can use as a reteaching or self-tutoring tool. Or you could use it for differentiation in your classroom and assign it to students to help them get caught up if they've been struggling, or assign it to students that are just super smart and need something to jump ahead. And so there's actually two different textbooks options. And they are the Flexbook 2.0 and the Flexbooks. And you can get to the 2.0 from the Flexbook. So we'll start here. And so let's do algebra and high school. We'll search for Flexbooks. And so even when you search, there's this little logo down here that tells you whether the book is a Flexbook 2.0 or no logo if it's just a regular Flexbook. But there's just a ton of books that you can use here for algebra at all levels, algebra and Spanish. It's just awesome. And so let's click this one here. And this is just a regular Flexbook. And so when you click on it, it gives you the table of contents. So let's just click the first one. It gives the students an introduction, and then it lays the chapter out, gives them an outline. We'll click the definition of a variable. And so when you do this, you get this textbook, and it's laid out in the viewer here. You can read it. They embed the videos in it. So just like any textbook, when it says, go to this website for more resources, well, it actually embeds those resources in the textbook for you right where they should be, which is awesome. And so that's really cool. At the bottom, you get review problems that you can assign for practice. I wouldn't take them as homework because I'll show you the resources in a second. There is an answer key for them, some vocab, and if you were signed in, you could take notes and highlight in this book. And so let's go back up to the top. The resources, the only resource here is the answer key, but different chapters have different resources. In the details, it gives you a lot of good information. It tells you the difficulty level, and I'll go into this when we talk about the Flexbooks 2.0. So let's go back and let's pick one of those 2.0 books, because what you'll see is that 2.0, it's their newest update. The textbooks, they look nicer. Instead of having it in that little viewer, it takes up the whole page. It tells us that the standards are aligned for the Common Core state standards. We'll talk about that again in a minute. And so let's just go right into the very beginning of the book. Now, the thing that's different about this, again, you can see that it takes up the entire page, so it's not in that little tiny viewer. I think it makes it a lot nicer and cleaner to look at. But as you're reading along, one of the things that I love most about it is this is an interactive textbook. And so it gives you practice problems. And because you don't have to have an account to use this, you get to do the practice problems that are right there embedded in the book. And so unlike the practice problems that that Veronica just showed us, this will give you immediate feedback, telling you not just whether you're right or wrong, but it also gives you an explanation as to why. And so I think that's great, especially for the students who maybe they can guess a right answer, but they don't know why it's the right answer. It tells them the number of kids at the pool depends on the temperature. So temperature is the input, not the number of kids. And then when they get it wrong, it gives them a little hint here. And it says, choose the equation that will find the number of returned blueberries most directly. So yeah, these equations are equivalent, but this one benefits us more. And so it's got different kinds of problems, which is awesome. And so this one it says select all that applies, and if a student just picks one of them, it'll tell you got one of two correct. And so it's a lot like what Veronica just showed us, but embedded directly in the textbook, right with where the section you've just finished reading. And then when you are done, it tells you that you were successful and gives you the option to review the questions that you answered, like the answers that you picked, or to start over. Now, when you start over, it does give you the exact same 5 problems, but it's something that's free, and it's a resource that you don't have to sign up for. And so you get what you paid for. The other cool thing is that it embeds those Plix problems, the interactive application problems, directly into the book as well. Again, right where it would be appropriate for them to get some practice. And I think because I am screen recording that it is glitching here. And since Veronica already showed it to you, I'll just go ahead and exit out of that. But those practice problems and Plix problems are embedded in there, which is super cool. But that's not the only thing. So students can click over here, the waffle button in the top right corner. They can find related content. It gives them study guides, videos, more Plix problems. They do have to be signed in with an account to use the extra Plix problems. But depending on what chapter it is, there's even more resources. Some chapters have related readings that will link them back to previous chapters, or just give them something a little more in depth that goes along with what they've already been reading. And so they can also, if they're signed in, highlight whatever they want to highlight, words up to certain letters, or once they've highlighted it, they can make their own notes, and any highlighting and notes that they've done in a section will all show up in this bank. And there are resources depending on what chapter you're in. This one doesn't currently have any resources, but you actually in the Flexbook 2.0 can add resources, which is awesome. And you as the teacher can share, or students could share with one another, the link to this. So again, you can send it directly to parents. And then another cool feature is for your students that have certain accommodations, those that need large print or have whatever they need. You can increase the print size to make it as big as they need. You can change the contrast, so to a night mode, and you can change the line spacing even. And so it gives them control of the textbook to make it as easy for them as they need to be able to read. And then the thing that I want to spend a good amount of time on here is something that's available to you as the teacher. And the concept details, if you click it, it gives a description of what the students are going to learn. It gives objectives, which is nice if you're in a district where you have to have those posted every day. You don't have to come up with them now. They're right here for you. The vocab that the students should be learning, the difficulty level. But if we scroll down, I like that it gives you the standards. So the Common Core state standards, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, and the TEKS. And so when you click on it, it'll pop up with all the different TEKS that apply to this lesson. So for lesson planning, that's awesome. And now I'm going to go ahead and sign in. So now that I'm signed in, you can see the highlighting that I made before. But the reason I wanted to sign in is because as a teacher, you can add to Flexbooks 2.0. And I have one already here called Algebra 1, so I'm going to OK that to send it there. And then when I go to my library, I can actually edit this book as much as I would like to edit it. And so let's choose this. Let's edit it. And so I've got the linear functions chapter here that we just added. I had already added it before, but this time I want to make some changes. And so here, at the very beginning of the chapter, it said, in this lesson you will use a linear function to model a scenario. Linear functions are represented by using equations, tables, and graphs. But maybe I don't want it to say linear functions because that's true of functions in general. And so I want to frame that for my kids, that all the functions that we're going to study can be represented with an equation or a table or a graph. And so I can make edits in that textbook as much as I'd like. Or if I had found a typo or something, I can change that as well. And so I think that's a really cool feature. So then you can save it, and essentially you're making your own textbook for your class. And you can pull from any book that had that 2.0 logo, or you can just make your own stuff. And so that's awesome. And then the last really cool thing that I wanted to show you for teachers who are new to teaching, or maybe new to teaching a specific class, or if you are mentoring a student, teacher, and you want to show them some resources, if you, from the Explore page, before you even click into the book, if you click the teacher edition, you can scroll and it says that you have lesson guides. Anytime you see a lesson guide on any book, you can click on it, and you can click the section, and it gives you a lesson plan, right? So if you hate lesson planning, this is a great option for you. I would say it's more of a skeletal lesson plan. If you wanted to make it more detailed, you could, but they tell you on day one, do this, spend this much time on it, doing these activities, and then day two, do these things, and gives you activity 1, 2, just a bunch of ideas that you can use for that chapter and that section. And so it's awesome. And so the last thing that I want to talk about is the pros and cons. Overwhelmingly, we all agree that this is an awesome resource and something that we think you could integrate into your classroom, and maybe even should integrate into your classroom, because they just have something for everything. And so, in the words of Tanya, when we were talking about this, and I was asking them for the pros and cons that they found, she said, I can't think of a single con. It's just really an awesome program. And so if there are some cons, if you want to be super picky, naturally the standards are aligned to the California state standards and using the Common Core. But just like I showed you in the textbook, you can go in and find different standards. You can find the TEKS. And so that's not that big of a deal. The other thing is that there are features that you have to have an account and be logged in and signed in to be able to use, which is not a big deal either, because your students can sign up for free, unless you work for a district like mine, where you are not allowed to sign students up for an account, and you are not allowed to make something mandatory if students have to sign up for that account for privacy reasons or whatever. So that could be a con depending on the district you work in. But if you work in a Google Classroom district, there's no drawbacks to that whatsoever. And so some of the biggest pros that we saw is, like we said, you can integrate it easily into Google Classrooms, and that each student can have their own account that way to track their grades. And so it's something that you don't have to do. It gives great information on the students. You can make your own textbooks, which is awesome. So if you think about doing a flipped classroom, this is something that could aid you very heavily. It's completely free. I mean, the pros just go on and on for this. And so overwhelmingly, we all agreed that this was a great freeware and would highly recommend its use.